International Criminal Court or ICC's investigation into the Philippine drug war will continue. This is after the ICC junked the government's appeal against the resumption of its probe on the war on drugs.
The President has maintained that he will never face a foreign court, he will never face foreign judges for crimes that allegedly took place in the Philippines. The Philippines is a sovereign and independent state, and because of it, sovereignty and jurisdiction demands that it should be local courts that should exercise jurisdiction over these crimes.
It's a foregone conclusion. Matagal na nilang gustong pumasok kahit wala silang jurisdiction. Pangalawa, hindi naman totoo yung sinasabi nila itutuloy ang investigation. They never investigated in the first place.
Malaking gulo kung mag-insist sila pumasok dito at umaayaw yung ating gobyerno. Sobrang panghihimasok niyan. Gusto lang ubusin yung angkan ng Duterte. Kahit na yung anak na walang kinalaman, idadamay nila sa war on drugs.
You can decide in The Hague where the ICC is, but that does not affect us here. They cannot enforce anything that they want in our country because we are not members of the ICC. I don't see them coming into the country to do anything that they want to do.
Justice Secretary Boying Remulla is adamant no entry for and no cooperation with prosecutors of the International Criminal Court or the ICC. He also reiterates that the Philippine government should just stop engaging with the ICC. But how long can government ignore a matter that involves thousands of Filipinos who lost loved ones in the war on drugs? And how can these victims be assured that the country's justice system is really working and there is no need to seek foreign legal recourse? We discuss in this episode of The Chiefs. And welcome to this edition of The Chiefs. I'm Ed Lingao. With me tonight in the studio, Ana Marie Pamintuan, the editor-in-chief of the Philippine Star, and of course, Lucy Cruz Valdez, the head of News 5.
Good evening.
I think it's a happy weekend already.
Happy weekend.
Happy
Yes.
weekend.
The weekend before Sona.
2 days before Sona. What are you expecting?
Maharlika.
Oo nga, napirmahan na.
Napirmahan na eh. Diba? Next step na doon is what the opposition intends to do with the Supreme Court.
Meron na silang early contra Sona, di ba? And
Oh,
sabi
yeah.
naman ni President, it's going to be a performance report. Simple. So, ano yung performance?
Yun ang tanong di ba? Parang if it's gonna be a performance report, we want to know how he read his own performance in the past year, di ba? But,
And anong numbers niya, di ba?
At saka hindi lang yun. Parang he agreed with I think, a professor's a grade of incomplete, di ba? Sabi niya, tama daw yung incomplete. He agrees with that. So, you really wonder nga parang, so kung ikaw mismo, self-grade mo, incomplete, di ba? I wonder what you're
Pag
going
sa UP,
to...
incomplete ka. Ibig sabihin
Conditional. Conditional yung 4 yun.
Conditional yun.
Aawain ka ng nanay tatay mo.
Hindi, you wonder na whether he meant nga raw completion in 6 years or completion within the year because you promised several things during the year, di ba? For the year. So, when we grade you now incomplete, ano ba yun? You agree with it, meaning you're giving yourself until 2028 to complete it?
That's also a smart way of
Medyo
doing it.
matagal yun,
That way, do not judge me until I end my
In
term.
other words, yes. So,
Pero yung pinaka-prominent niya kasing campaign promise, yung 20 a kilo rice.
Exactly.
Medyo matagal-tagal yung 2020.
Oo,
hintayin
diba?
na yun.
So,
Diba?
come on, 2028, 20 pesos. That feeling mo with the inflation,
Pati nga sa
prices
kadiwa,
are always
diba?
sticky going down.
Sana 28 na lang, hindi 20 para 2028
mas
yung
realistic.
bagay, di ba? 28 sa 2028.
Okay, ano?
Hindi, kahit sa kadiwa, di ba? 25 ang kaya hanggang 25.
Tapos sa midterm,
Lugi pa yon.
Sa midterm, 25 para sa 2025. Kasi 25 nga sa kadiwa eh.
Ay, bumababa.
Pero kadiwa lang yun.
Ayun na nga. Ayun
Tapos
ang
ano pa yan,
problema.
Yun yung buffer stock natin.
Pero kung yun na nga, kung performance report, di ba? Yung pinaka-prominent natin mga problema the past year, puro sa agriculture eh.
Yeah.
Yan ang problema.
Siya pa ang secretary, di ba?
Yun na nga.
Oo.
In fact, inflation, food inflation, it's food-driven inflation.
Right.
Yeah.
But in fairness to him, pwede niyang pwede niya naman talagang i-report na in terms of the diplomacy, di ba?
Oh, yan.
Medyo
Nag-iba
madami
talaga.
siya talagang pwedeng ipagyabang doon. Tapos,
Changing the image of the
Oh,
conduct.
yan,
of
yan.
the
Rebranding. Ayan na naman kaya.
yan, di ba?
Mm.
Oo.
I don't know if you want to use the word rebranding kasi may mga brands na hindi maganda.
Hindi sila nagro-roll out nun eh. Sila nagro-roll out nun. May bago na tayong bagong Pilipinas. Oh.
Yes. Yeah.
Huwag na yung masyadong controversial.
And there were also some good laws passed like for condonation dun sa
Oh, that's true. Yung
sa
ng
farmer
mga
sa farmer
agrarian
fisheries,
reform.
yeah.
Although
Yeah.
sabi
Huge
nila,
deal.
yun nga daw yung mga
Oo.
talagang hindi na makabayad. Yan ang
Talaga.
sabi naman ng mga critics.
Wala ka ng lugi doon dahil matagal nang
Talagang
nawala
hindi na
yun
nila
at
kaya.
wala
Oh,
na
ilang
talaga
percent tayo nakakabayad talaga eh. What? I
Yan na
think
nga, yan na nga.
17%
Kaya
na yata
give up ka
nakakabayad
na lang.
thereabouts ng kanilang regular
Right.
At
amortization.
saka marami nagbenta ng lupa nila. Di ba?
Totoo yan.
But I suppose that the next step there is after you condone all those loans, how do you provide
Exactly, yung
support services
puhunan na naman nila, di ba? Para so they can plant again. Yun pa rin naman yung challenge eh.
Yeah, that's always been a challenge.
Unless you
Yan,
subsidize that again, di ba? Wala na naman
Puro agriculture yan sinasabi
Yeah.
nyo, ha? Kaya,
Dami na pag-usapan. SONA, Maharlika, ICC, all these things we will talk about in the next hour. We will be bringing in our first guest for this episode after the break. The TC will be right back.
welcome back to the Chiefs. We now have former Bayan Muna Party List Representative, Attorney Neri Colmenares. Good evening and welcome to the program, Attorney.
Good
Evening, sir.
evening, sir.
Attorney, can you hear us?
Good evening po, Ami. Good
Hi.
evening po, Lucia and Ed. Thank you po.
Hi, Attorney.
Yes, I can hear you. Hi.
Attorney,
Yes.
as promised by the
Hi, good
administration.
evening po.
Attorney, as promised by the administration, napasa na si Maharlika Investment Fund, signed into law, at siguradong magse-center stage at the State of the Nation address. Ang balak po, ang balita po namin, balak nyo i-challenge. No? You will be one of the groups that will challenge the constitutionality of the MIF law before the Supreme Court. Kumusta po yung balak ninyo to, yung plano ninyo?
Well, ngayon lang naman namin nakita yung batas kasi matagal na hindi namin makita ang enrolled bill. Taka nga kami, why all the secrecy doon sa enrolled bill? So, but we're going to challenge it. We're preparing it now. Of course, the first challenge there is that the law was actually a result of a certification of emergency which does not exist. That's why they short-circuited the House process in December of 2022 last year, practically stifling any question or opposition from the minority. And the same thing happened in the Senate because of that certification. So we'll prove before the Supreme Court there was no calamity or emergency that requires the immediate enactment of the law. Sufficient to shortcut the legislative processes. In fact, kung titingnan mo, saan ang emergency? Napasa nila ng May 31. Kailan na nila transmit sa Malacanang. So that is an admission na walang emergency. And of course, secondly, yung yung 500 billion pesos na para sana sa ayuda, para sana sa edukasyon, pangkalusugan, for the agriculture. You just mentioned agriculture kanina. And many other social services ay napasa doon sa isang korporasyon na hindi natin kilala. In fact, the 9 members of the board, 6 of them are from private corporations. So questionable talaga yan na may 500 billion of public funds to be managed by 6 individuals from private corporations rather than government itself. No? So, yeah, and of course, there are changes in the bill. Binago nila yung pinasa nilang bill noong May 31, yung mga wala doon sa inaprubahan nilang bill, nilagay nila sa batas. Pero yung mga nasa bill naman na inaprubahan nila, dinilit naman nila sa batas. So all these things will go into the validity of the Supreme Court, of the law, the Maharlika law, which was rushed and which is not independent, which is not transparent, and therefore susceptible to either losses or corruption in its implementation.
So as legal processes go, attorney, how will this work? Are you going to ask for an injunction when you file? In other words, will this in effect stop the formation or the implementation or execution of the Maharlika Investment Fund?
Yes, definitely in the petition itself, we will ask for a restraining order from the court kasi irreparable damage na yan eh. The moment that the law is allowed to be implemented, naglilipat na ng billions and billions of pesos of public funds. Who knows, they invested na agad. So, we would ask the court for a restraining order. Very patent very patent ang unconstitutionality. I mean, look, Luci, where did you see ever that a bill approved on third reading by both houses, so by the Senate and then adopted by the House on May 31 and then ratified by the House of Representatives, later on, the copy of the bill they were approving will be different from the law that was signed. I think the Supreme Court will not allow that because as far as the Constitution is concerned, only Congress can pass or amend a bill or a law. Hindi pwedeng a group of people, the Senate President or the Speaker of the House or certain senators, even the author himself, not a group of people can through Viber discuss among themselves that, oh, let's amend this, let's amend that, because they are not empowered to do that, especially since Congress was in recess, adjourned. How can you convene the House and the Senate in a situation na suspended ang sessions by a group of people who will amend the bill, approve bill? So they have no authority sa law. That's ultra vires. There is nowhere in the Constitution that says that there is a Bible legislation, and more importantly, hindi ka pwede magdagdag bawas sa bill na inaprubahan ng both houses. They inserted, for example, a provision there in section 21 of the section 21K of the approved bill. Sabi doon, yung emoluments ng personnel, ng officials ng Maharlika will be subject to the GOCC law. Doon sa batas, they added a provision which says, well, except for for technical and professional services, yung mga management analysts, yung mga risk management analysts, yung mga brokers. Yes, exception. Yes. Secondly, the personnel and the officials of the Maharlika Incorporation shall receive the same salaries, etc., etc.
But wait a minute.
Sa law, they added honoraria. May honorarium na ngayon na wala naman doon sa bill na in-approve nila.
But just for clarification, attorney, hindi ba pwede naman mag-bycam kahit na naka-recess? Because they make their own rules, right? Congress and Senate, they make their own rules. So can they claim, for example, that under Senate rules as well as Congress rules, pwede sila mag-bycam during recess, and that in effect, the people in attendance represent their respective houses? Di ba pwedeng yun ang argument nila dyan?
Actually, they can argue that, although, of course, we will contest that. How can there be a BICAM? The BICAM committee must be, of course, elected or appointed by both houses, kung sino representatives namin doon. They finished the BICAM kasi on May 31 eh. That's why it's over na eh. The recess na kasi ng May 31 after that eh. So, they can claim that, but their second problem there is that it needs to be ratified by both houses. You have the BICAM as a matter of rule. You have to go back to your respective house and say, this is what we agreed.
So, dapat mag-plenary ulit, ganon?
Yes, mag-plenary, i-ratify yan. Oh, by the way, magbibigay pala tayo ng honoraria, ha? Oh, by the way, yung special professional services, i-exempt natin sa GOCC Act, ha? I mean, oh, by the way, we will amend certain provisions of this bill. Do you agree? Only the House, if the House... Yeah, so they have a problem there because not only did they fail to do a BICAM, and they were not appointed or elected by the House officially to be the BICAM representatives, and more importantly, kahit ano pa man sabihin nila, it was not ratified by both houses. So, may tulog talaga sila sa Korte Suprema. At in fact, there are many senators na rin nagsabi, we cannot change that. We cannot change that kasi matcha-challenge talaga yan sa Korte Suprema because Eh kung ganun pala, di na-aprubahan nyo na ang bill. Everybody natulog na tayo, approve na pala yan. And then a group of people will amend it, tapos magugulat
So
na lang
it
tayo
sets
sa
a precedent, no? It sets a dangerous
Yes.
precedent for other laws or bills in the
Yes.
future. Pero
Yes.
ako, going back to the Maharlika itself, yun
Yes.
mismong core of this law. At best, I think what you will just accomplish is a delaying of the execution or the passing of the Maharlika law, at best. But do you think that this will actually affect amendments in the Maharlika? If not a complete, di ba, anong tawag doon, removal of that law, a
Overhaul.
veto of that law, although
Recall.
it's only a president, yeah, a recall, no? That's the technical term. Do you
Yes.
think that
Yes,
it will
well,
affect a recall?
Well, actually, the proposal, the petition, the initial petition of Bayan muna was a good petition for them, actually, because they were complaining, a mistake, we need to correct some. And then later on in the Senate, they said, oh, we made a mistake, we need to correct some provisions. Our petition before is everybody happy. Our petition was merely to invalidate the presidential certification of emergency, put it back, give it back to both houses, so that they follow the first, second, third reading, and they could actually do it. I mean, you know, sige, binilik ng Korte Suprema, o Lunes, o di Biyernes, or the next week, o tapos nyo na ang third reading. Kasi the requirement of the Constitution is only that the bill shall become law only if it passes on 3 readings on 3 separate days.
Yes, yes.
Oh, di tapos na, they can just hold the 3 readings in 3 separate days, and in 2 weeks' time. I could not understand Ed, Lucci, and Ami, this obsession to rush it. It's a strategic investment program. I mean, it will earn money probably, if it ever earns, 5, 6, 7 years from now. Magugunaw ba ang mundo pag hindi niya maaprubahan ngayong araw? Maaprubahan nyo next week o
yes,
next
I know.
month? Hindi
But aren't you
magugunaw ang
just
mundo
delaying the inevitable?
Yeah.
I guess that's the question, di ba? You're just delaying the inevitable.
No. But if the Supreme Court votes the law, then it goes back to them and they have to refile it. Maybe they will, you know, whatever they do. But the fact is, if we win the petition and the Supreme Court said, you cannot have that, it has to be voided. And so it's voided, they go back to first reading. Di, doon naman na mag-question yung minority ulit, yung mga kabayan, sila, Congressman Edsel Lagman and the others. And maybe by this time, marami na siguro yung opposition congressman or senators na sasama doon sa opposition. Kasi nakita naman nila how untransparent the bill is, to the extent that it was amended by a few people. And nobody has seen, not even senators and members, copy until the president signed it. Actually, I didn't see the enrolled copy until it was really a law the next day pa, because it was really a very secretive process. So yeah, I don't think it will just delay it, but the voiding of law violates our constitution that transfers public funds away from the legislative scrutiny of both houses of Congress to an amorphous corporation that we don't even know who the directors are. Imagine 500 billion pesos of public funds, ang magmamanage are 6.
Yes, sir. Sir,
6
I think
private
Yes, sir.
private sector people na we don't know where it will come from.
Sir, I think yung talagang what surprised a lot of us, we didn't expect this, at least to me it's a surprise, na there was more to the amendments pala than just the prescriptive periods of Article 10 and 11.
Yes.
All the while we were thinking
Yes.
na yun lang ang binago. Now you're saying,
No.
and I suppose, sir, I suppose you have the documents for this. Now you're saying pati yung exemptions dun sa GOCC Act for professional services
Yes.
and yung honoraria,
Yes.
binago rin ito coming from what was approved
Yes.
on third reading and ratified.
Yes. In fact, I only knew, that's what I thought to Ed. Kasi that's the only thing we saw. Nobody's really seen the enrolled bill. When I read the law last night, I saw that, they added a few. In fact, ito pa, Ed. In the Senate enrolled bill of SB 2020, and I confirmed this in the transcript, there is a provision there that the law will become effective upon publication of Maharlika in English and Filipino. And then I consulted the transcript, and clearly it shows there that Senator Robin Padilla did propose that going the third reading copy of the bill. But when I saw the law, tinanggal nila yung Filipino. I don't know for what reason, but they cannot amend the effectivity, especially ito, this actually is on the effectivity of the law. The moment they do not follow the effectivity, it will never be effective. So now they're in a conundrum. They're in a tight, kumbaga, paano natin gawin to? May tinanggal tayo that could render the entire law not only unconstitutional, but not effective because we didn't follow what we approved.
Okay, so apart from Maharlika, sabi ni President Marcos, yung State of the Nation address niya will be a performance report. Kayo, anong tingin nyo sa kanyang performance, the first year?
Ako hindi incomplete bagsak Kasi bagong Pilipinas, anong magbago sa Pilipinas? During the time of Duterte, mataas ang presyo ng bilihin, mababa ang sahod. Ngayon ba bumaba ang presyo ng bilihin, tumaas ba ang sahod? During the time of Duterte, human rights violations taken place, walang rule of law. Ito pa rin nga, human rights violations are taking place. Inflation, unemployment, the same thing, no? And agriculture, mentioned heavily, nagdudusa ang magsasaka natin. At, so I don't see any performance here worth mentioning. Probably his travels abroad, I don't know, maybe probably contributed a little. But that's not the problem. I mean, these foreign trips do not solve inflation, do not solve the problems in agriculture, do not solve corruption in the country. So, yeah, para sa akin, bagsak yun because you can only report a positive performance or ipapasa ka lang ng teacher mo pag may nagawa kang substantial naman, di ba? Hindi pwedeng kung ano man yung... Kung dati ang exam ng dating presidente ay ang sagot ay bagsak at yun pa rin ang sagot mo ngayon, di bagsak ka rin. Alam nga namang ipapasa ka ng teacher. Binagsak ko ng si Duterte dati for the same performance. I cannot pass you now for the same performance.
Pero sir,
so,
but there are also those who say na may some good laws also passed like yung condonation dun sa sa bad loans for agrarian reform beneficiaries. That's around 50 billion. I know it's not yet a complete solution to everything, but some are saying that's also a good start.
Actually, nagugulat ako dyan usually sa mga presidente na nag-claim ng good laws kasi pinasaya ng House at ng Senate. Pumirma lang naman ng presidente dyan. But anyway, the condonation of farmers dyan, alam mo matagal nang sinasabi namin, noon pa yan. Sabi namin, isa lang tayo sa 3 bansa sa buong mundo na ang land reform natin, pinapabayaran natin ang lupa sa magsasaka. Kasi ang pag pinabayaran mo yan sa magsasaka ang lupa, hindi magsasucceed yan. We said it 25 years ago. We said it 20, Carper, lahat ng mga bills nila dyan. We're saying, huwag niyong pabayaran kasi isang bagyo lang yan. Hindi na makabayad yan ng kanyang amortisasyon. Ang isang anak lang yan na ospital, hindi na makabayad yan. So do not make them pay for land which they've been tilling for 100 million years, lolo pa nila ng titig, pabayaran mo pa sa kanila, para mo pa sa kanila. So, in any case, they merely affirm what was raised before. And you know what? When we were raising that before, palagi ang majority, palagi, no, it cannot happen. See? I mean, pwede naman pala Sabi mo nga kanina, kung gusto, may paraan So, yeah, I mean, ako naman, there would be some good things that probably transpired in any presidency. I'm sure Hitler did something good. I mean, hindi naman siguro 100% na walang nagawa si Hitler, but he's still Hitler, di ba? I mean, grabe pa rin yung ginawa niya. So, hindi mo pwedeng ipapasa merely because of good laws. Performance is based on the rule rather than on the exception. Without me admitting that very law is good. Ang sinasabi ko lang na actually yung batas na yan, maraming problema dyan. But still, matagal na namin sinasabi na huwag niyong pabayaran sa magsasaka. And they're only now realizing it 25, 30 years after sinasabi namin na nga naman, huwag na lang natin pabayaran ito sana. But actually, hindi totoo yan. Pababayaran pa rin nila ang future kung sakali man na mga agrarian reform policies nila. Ito lang kinundo nila mga previous, which actually talagang, kumbaga sa accounting, bad debts na yan. Bad debts na yan, so talagang hindi na rin nila masingil yan kasi gutom na yung mga magsasaka natin and really cannot afford to pay those deaths.
O sige, let's move on na to your reaction to the ICC's decision to resume investigations. No? What do you think of what seems to be a deadlock at this point? No, because government has already said through the DOJ that it simply will not allow any kind of investigation to take place. That Senator Bato de la Rosa, ex-President Duterte, even VP Sara Duterte, if that's true, no, nakasama siya, will not be arrested, cannot be arrested. There's no way that this investigation can push through. What do you think of that deadlock? Is there a way you
Yes.
think that the ICC
No.
can actually do this?
No, actually, their obsession again, ang papapasukin dito ang prosecutor para mag-imbestiga, hindi nila papayagan. That's really wrong because the prosecutor is not asking to come over. It's not even decisive for the prosecutor to go for the ICC to go to the scene of the crime to investigate. In fact, there are many cases in the ICC where they investigated even if they were not allowed to enter the country. Kasi usually ICC files charges against leaders, against generals, against presidents and prime ministers. So talaga hindi sila nakakapasok doon, but the investigation was pursued. And then, there were warrants of arrest in some cases. Because you can investigate naman through various means. In fact, that's why I'm very surprised with the DOJ because they know that, for example, a fiscal, when you investigate a complaint before you, does the fiscal go to the barangay kung saan nagsaksakan, saan nagpatayan? Of course not. The fiscal sits in his office and tells the respondent, magsubmit ka nga ng counter affidavit mo, and then you come here, next week, may preliminary investigation tayo. So, does the fiscal go to the place where the crime was committed? No, of course not. Sabihin ng barangay captain na may kaso siya doon sa fiscal, hindi ka papasok sa barangay ko. Ang sabihin na naman ng fiscal, hindi ko naman kailan pumunta dyan eh.
Okay, got that.
Di
But
ba?
how,
I mean,
yeah,
ngayon,
I guess the question nga is how will justice be rendered then? I mean, if ICC to, and there will be no investigation of documents and no checking out the scene of the crime, how do we expect justice, if indeed that's what they're after, no? To actually be carried out? What kind of justice will be carried out? Because in the normal course of criminal proceedings, nakukulong ang may sala, even as the trial is going on, right? But in this case, none of that will take place. So how will justice look in this case if it's pursued?
Yes, we are now in the preliminary investigation stage, and normally, in many cases, in preliminary investigation stage, the respondents do not submit evidence or counter affidavit. So it's the complainant who provides it, right? So can the victims go to The Hague? Well, yeah, mahal lang. So ICC sometimes go to a nearby country, like somewhere near the Philippines, for example, where it's easier and cheaper to bring the witnesses to that country. Secondly, can it be done through camera, yung video? Yeah, many courts are doing that, even in the Philippines now. The ICC has been doing that. Are these evidence that are acceptable in courts of law now? Yes, of course. It's now acceptable in courts, and even in the Philippines here, may mga digital evidence rules na tayo. So, can a witness testify directly or give documents, provide documents? I mean, the admissions of President Duterte are public knowledge. Even his speeches before Congress are in the official gazette. So all these things can be done by the prosecutor and investigate. So justice can still be done. During trial, that's a different thing. But that's trial. For now, we're still in the investigation stage. So yeah, it will continue. And it's not true when they say, oh, you cannot continue because we will not allow you to come in, as if it is the most decisive requirement in any investigation.
So dahil investigation pa lang yan actually, hindi pa siya mag-i-issue ng arrest warrant, di ba? It will be during the trial.
Under the rules of the ICC, there is what is called the pre-indictment warrant of arrest, where the prosecutor can request the pre-trial chamber to issue a warrant of arrest in cases where the accused will abscond or the evidence will be destroyed, or witnesses are, being threatened, etc., etc. So there is that case. Will the prosecutor issue that kind of a warrant during, will the prosecutor request for that kind of a warrant during the investigation stage? We don't know. But under the rules, it can be done. Can it be done during trial? Of course, yes. That's the surer way. During trial, when the charges have been confirmed, the rules of the ICC says confirmation of charges. Once it's done, there can be a warrant of arrest issued against President Duterte and some of his subordinates mentioned by the ICC.
So once the arrest warrant is issued, lahat ng member states ng ICC, it can be enforced?
It can, because under the ICC, all member states have the obligation to implement the order. So how can it be done if the Philippines will not implement it? There are two ways in the experience of the ICC that the warrant was executed despite the non-cooperation of the state. The first is, of course, if the accused will go to a place which is ready to execute it. So if you go for, I don't know, for example, somewhere in Europe, Britain, England, London. London arrested Pinochet before of Chile when he was dropping by London a long time ago. So they can still do it again. So they can only go probably to friendly states like China. They can go back to China 100 million times a year. But if they go to other states, they may not get execute the warrant. The second reason for possible execution of a warrant of a non-cooperative state is nagbago ang ihip ng hangin. Nanalo ang oposisyon o yung nakaupong presidente mismo, nagbago ang ihip sa alyansa na sabihin niya, I will implement the ICC arrest warrant. So that happened in Sudan when the opposition won the next election and al-Bashir lost the presidency. And then later on, the opposition said, we are going to execute the warrant of arrest. So it can be done either in the new administration, if there's an opposition victory in 2028, or who knows? Who knows? The current president may say, well, Mr. Duterte, you went to China without my permission, you're doing these things, etc. I think I have to execute this warrant now, especially if the threat of Duterte-Marcos rivalry in the 2028 presidential election takes shape. This is not a very far off a possibility as far as I'm concerned.
Attorney, taga muna, bakit mo sinasabing walang paalam? Nalalaman ka ba dyan sa storya?
No.
Why do you say that President Duterte went to China without permission from
sabi sir ng
President
DBM, alam naman daw niya.
Alam daw niya.
Aware.
Well, aware, hindi just namin aware before or aware after.
But
for lawyers, we call that the negative pregnant. For lawyers, that is actually the fatal admission na hindi nagpaalam kasi alam. When the president says, I know about it, he just knows about it. He didn't, there was no asking of permission, etc. But anyway, that's just my reading of the statement, because if President Marcos sent Duterte there, President Marcos would have said, I sent him there. In fact, I discussed, inutusan ko siya, pumunta ka doon. Pero yung sinabing, I know about it, at sana naman, pag-usapan naman nila yung ginagawa ng China sa West Philippine Sea. That is a fatal admission in a court of law for me.
Pero sir,
sabihin ko,
yes, sir.
Wala kang alam doon sa pag-travel niya.
Pero sir, on the 2 points that you raised, number one, hindi naman likely na si dating Pangulong Digong ay pupunta ng EU kasi dati na niya binabakbakan ng EU. So it's not like he's going to go anywhere like to London or to Europe. And number two po, maaari nga naman magbagong ihip ng hangin, pero as it is right now, the opposition as we know it, kahit nga si Coco, hinahanap niya kung nasa na opposition. I get what you mean na baka magbagong ihip ng hangin ng Marcos administration, but that's also,
what is the likelihood of that happening?
That's also pushing kasi si Sara is trying to project at least na she's in good terms, very good terms.
Hindi, tsaka may prescriptive period ba to, attorney? Kasi, di ba, I mean, they can only investigate so long and so far.
So 2 points. Under the rope statute, there is no prescription for heinous crimes. Secondly, yung opposition, you know what? 1 year after elections, the opposition is not really clear. It's usually 2 years or even the year before the election that there is a clear opposition. So in any case, I don't want to preempt whatever the opposition does. But what I'm saying there are two ways of executing a warrant. Unlike the way they say it now, na parang it's impossible. No, of course not. There are many instances when it became possible despite the non-cooperation of the states on the 2 points I just mentioned a while ago.
Well, ang sabi ng Department of Justice, or I think the Solicitor General, kapag nag-issue daw ng arrest warrant, the Philippine government will challenge the jurisdiction of the ICC. Anong
That's the
masasabi niyo
problem.
doon?
That's the problem because after saying we will not cooperate, we are not under your jurisdiction, then they go there and challenge. Is that not already tantamount to recognizing the jurisdiction? So, on one hand, if they say na we will not cooperate, sige na, di bahala na kayo dyan, that is also practically abandoning President Duterte. Because that is almost saying na wala ka ng depensa dyan, bahala ka sa sarili mo, di ba? And I'm sure if he does that, talagang matutuloy yung trial dito kasi walang ebidensyang isasubmit yung respondent. So, they are now in a quandary. Do we admit na lang jurisdiction and submit our evidence or do we maintain this tact of not admitting to the jurisdiction, therefore wala kaming ebidensya dyan? Well, if they believe that it cannot be implemented, the arrest warrant, for example, the judgment of the court, then they may say, hindi na lang kami cooperate dyan. But it's their own lookout. President Duterte must really consult lawyers here. Kasi it's his life that is, his liberty that's at stake here. So, yeah, I guess it's up to them. Will they submit their evidence or not? Will they challenge the jurisdiction or not? But you cannot have your cake and eat it too. You cannot say that, we don't accept the jurisdiction, but every phase of the hearing, nandun ka, sasubmit ka ng appeal and so on. You can't have that. I think the ICC will also not allow that. Kasi sabihin ng ICC, teka muna, na-admit to ba o hindi? Ba't ka submit ng submit? Wala ka palang personality dito. So, yeah. For them, it's their choice. For me naman, it would be better if President Duterte submits his evidence. We feel that the evidence is strong, very, very strong. And no matter what evidence he submits, the odds are stacked against him because of his pronouncements, actions, and so on.
But isn't the main bone of contention also the fact that, as far as the government is concerned, that it's not true that the cases are not being tried here, that there is no progress as far as seeking justice for the victims of the drug war. And I think that's going to be their defense, na hindi totoo yung allegation nyo that the judicial system in the Philippines is not working. What about that itself? I mean, even diplomacy-wise, doesn't that hold some water in the sense that many other nations, especially partners of the Philippines, will agree that we're not exactly without a working judicial system. I mean, I'm sure you will agree with that as well, right? It's not like the courts are not functioning. Isn't that, a conclusion that is also easy to defend on its face? I think we're having a technical problem and we've lost Attorney Colmenares at this point, but we're going to wait for the signal to come through. Pero di ba yun yung point ko, Ede, di ba? Parang
the complementarity issue.
Exactly, di ba?
Yan ang sinasabi nila.
Parang ang hirap.
Medyo mabagal nga lang daw kasi sabi nga sa atin ni Solicitor General, ay hirap humanap ng witness, natatakot.
Yeah.
And in fact, that was what Secretary Remulla said, di ba, na come out, sabi niya, dun sa mga police who were involved and talk to us, we will protect you, tell us your story. Ewan ko lang kung di natin alam kung may ganung response na.
No, but all these efforts, di ba, also show naman, to a certain degree, goodwill from the government, di ba? An effort to really
Kasi,
go to the bottom
kasi
of
those familiar
these
with
drug
our
cases.
justice system, of course, alam naman talaga na may
Mabagal
kabagal
naman talaga, di ba?
I remember last year, si Boying Remulla was telling us, and it was a surprising revelation that they are investigating and that they're asking more policemen to come
Yun
out.
na nga, sabi ko.
Yes.
Diba?
Oo.
Oo.
Na
I was
hindi lang
surprised.
natin alam kung ano naging response ng mga pulis, di ba?
Oo.
I mean, it seems we have lost the signal already completely. Daming revelations.
Yeah.
Pati yung dagdag bawas sa...
Actually,
Oo nga
sa
eh.
Maharlika.
Oo nga, ngayon lang natin
Akala ko,
naalala yun.
Yan ang
10 and
storya.
20 lang. May iba
Saka
palang dagdag
meron pang
bawas.
nagwa-warning eh, hindi ko lang natanong eh, di ba may nagwa-warning? Ano daw ang impact naman neto dun sa ating mga investment roadshows? Kasi we know na lalo na sa Europe, di ba?
Oo.
Pag meron kang human rights issue, your government,
Yes,
di
that
ba?
too.
Hindi matatakot yung mga investor eh.
Oo, right.
Di ba? Because they have laws actually preventing them
Right.
and penalizing them.
Yes.
Penalizing them if they deal with those types of governments.
Oo.
So,
Exactly.
ano yan, hindi
Kasi
naman to
may
gobyerno.
sanction sila eh, di ba?
Yan
Sila
ang
rin
sabi niya, no? Yung
magkakasanction.
nangiintriga eh.
Yes.
Hindi naman Marcos administration, yung
Oo.
previous administration.
That's true.
Anong gagawin
anong
netong
gagawin nito? Oo.
administration
That's
na to? Yan ang problema.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Okay.
it's unfortunate that we will not hear the answer of Attorney Colmenares, but we're still trying.
he's on
Mag-phone
the phone.
patch.
Okay, phone
Okay.
patch. Yeah.
Sige. Okay, we're trying to... Okay.
Is he back?
Okay.
Oh, he's back.
Oh, he's back na. Ikaw na.
There you go, Attorney Colmenares. Did you hear my last question? Or I'll just ask it again.
Before we were cut off.
Yes.
Actually, that's one of the most, for me, it's a very tricky answer they have, but very deceptive as far as I'm concerned. That's why they keep closing in all the phases of the investigation, because they continue to assert that. The ICC requires that the ICC will not have jurisdiction unless there is an investigation of the culprit, prosecution of the culprit in the Philippines, for example, in the state. The question, is President Duterte under investigation here? No. Is he prosecuted here? No. So that's it. Hello, am I still on?
Yes, you are. We hear you.
Okay.
Yes,
Yes. So, no. So, immediately, there is no defense to that. The ICC has jurisdiction. But even if the ICC rule says, even if there is prosecution in the state, in the Philippines, for example, the ICC will still retain jurisdiction if it is found that unable or unwilling to prosecute. Right? Now, we keep on harping on the unable. We are able because we have a justice system. Okay. But
Yes.
then the problem is they're not answering the unwilling part, because that's the requirement of the ICC. So even if you're able but you're unwilling, you can't use that. Are they willing? Well, if you look at it, has Duterte ever been investigated here? No. That's actually the test of willingness. If you're willing, here comes, a person who practically admitted everything in public, and yet you're not filing cases against him. I mean, when President Duterte says, I ordered the killing, kill, I will grant you amnesty, and activists would say, well, can you now charge him or investigate him? The police will say, oh, that's not evidence, it's just, a verbal statement. But the activists say, oh, Duterte, mamatay tao ka, you're a human rights violator, a dictator, biglang tag ka na, CPP, NPA ka na, babilis na sa alas 4 ang police. So, para sa akin, that's a sign of unwillingness. And the fact that very few police, 6,200 plus, 600 plus ang matay, is inadmit ng police. Wala silang halos investigation. Under the rules, Lucci, Ami, and Ed, under the rules, every time there is a police operation and a killing results, the rules require an arraignment. No one can just say, well, for self-defense, and everybody, self-defense pala. No. The rules require that you put him under arraignment kasi that to find out if it's true or not. Hello? Do you
Yes,
see?
sir. Yes, we
Yes, sir.
can hear you.
Wala tayo. Yeah. So, wala silang ginawang arraignment doon. Even to, ganun pala, no, walang arraignment. Then any police can kill anybody and say, well, self-defense, and then not nothing. Self-defense is your defense. When there is a court case or an arraignment, and they will say, why did you kill? Then you raise it as a defense. It was self-defense kasi. But there has to be an arraignment. There has to be a investigation, so to speak, or a case, so to speak, before you can be allowed to claim self-defense. They didn't do that. That's unwillingness. 6,600 yung admit na pinatay nila during operations. I mean, how many cases are there in court or under investigation? 100? O ilan ang years na 2016 pa nangyari yun. And very few. You cannot raise it as a defense. They will lose. They continue to harp on the ability of the courts because that is not the only thing required by the Rome Statute or the ICC. But also, not only the ability, but also the willingness to use your judicial system to bring the court case to account.
All right.
Okay. We'd like to say thank you very much to Attorney Neri Colmenares, sir.
Thank you,
Maraming
sir.
salamat for staying with us the whole time.
Thank you,
And-
Attorney.
Ingat po.
Maraming salamat din po. Thank you.
And that's all we have for the Chiefs. I'm Ed Lingao.
We hope what was discussed will keep the conversation going. I'm Ami Pamintuan.
And I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez. We are One News, all sides, all the time.